Madison's going to do great things as our new regional operations director. My name is Jake Coleman. I'm 44. Bob Patterson just handed 5 years of my work to his 23-year-old daughter who'd been here 3 months. This was bullshit. Conference room smelled like old coffee and disappointment. Everyone clapped. I clapped too. Had to. Madison smiled like she'd earned something. Fresh UT business diploma. 0 experience. Nothing. Bob stood there grinning. His daughter, his little princess. Everyone knew it. Nobody talked about it. Jake's been invaluable getting Madison up to speed, Bob said. Like that made it better. Like 5 years of perfect reviews and working weekends was just training for his kid. I nodded, happy to help. Meeting ended. People shook Madison's hand. I gathered my stuff. Moved slow. My head was clear now. Like when you wake up at 3 a.m. and suddenly know exactly what's been bugging you for months. Bob caught my arm. Jake, stick around. We stood alone. He loosened his tie. Tried to look sorry. Bob was 52, fat gut, thinning hair combed over to hide the bald spots. Got his job when his father-in-law retired. Same damn thing he just pulled with Madison. I know this might surprise you, he said, but Madison brings fresh perspectives. Sure, you understand, right? Nothing personal. I looked at him. I understand perfectly. He relaxed. Good. You're valuable, Jake. Valuable. Not valuable enough for the promotion. Valuable enough to train his daughter. If you like stories about greed and how real expertise beats people who abuse power, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Every day brings completely new stories, each one more intense than the last. I walked back to my desk. Office buzzed with normal activity. Phones ringing. Keyboards clicking. People solving problems. Same old shit. I opened my laptop. Stared at the screen. Then I started typing. Started at Blackstone Manufacturing, March 2019. Right after my divorce finalized. Needed fresh start. Industrial equipment distribution across the Southwest seemed solid. Something to build on. Boring work that paid $65,000 and let me sleep at night. Bob hired me himself. Shook my hand. Said they needed someone with my experience. I'd spent 12 years at my previous company before budget cuts killed my position. At 44, starting over sucked. But Bob made it sound good. We're growing fast, he said during interview. Lots of room for advancement for the right people. I became the right guy. Worked weekends when shipments were late. Stayed late when customers had emergencies. Troubleshot equipment failures across 4 states. Built relationships with suppliers, Phoenix to Houston. Performance reviews were perfect. Bob always smiled. Always promised bigger things. Your management material, Jake. Just be patient. Patient. I was good at being patient. My daughter Emma visited every other weekend. She was 16, smart enough to see when her dad looked tired. Sometimes she'd find me at kitchen table Sunday mornings. Laptop open, work emails. Dad, it's the weekend. Just catching up. Building something good here. She'd roll her eyes. But she understood. Her mom remarried a lawyer who worked reasonable hours and coached Little League. I was the dad who worked too much but sent birthday money on time. Never missed school plays. Had $200 alimony payments every month that reminded me why this job had to work out. When I told Emma about the possible promotion, she got excited. My dad's going to be the director, she told her friends. Now I'd have to explain why that wasn't happening. First problem showed up 6 months ago. Bob mentioned his daughter might join the company. Smart girl, just graduated UT. Business degree. I nodded, thought nothing of it. Companies hire graduates all the time. Start them entry level. Let them learn from ground up. But Madison didn't start at the bottom. Started in the office next to Bob's with title operations specialist and salary I could only guess at. Bob introduced her around like visiting royalty. Madison's going to observe our processes. Learn how we do things. Madison observed by sitting in my client calls, taking notes while I explained vendor negotiations. Asked questions that showed she didn't understand the basics of what we did. But she was eager and polite. Said yes, sir, and thank you, like her mother raised her right. I trained her because that's what you do. Help the new person. Even when new person's last name is Patterson. Even when her daddy signs your checks. Even when you start to suspect where this is heading. I knew for sure 3 weeks ago. Stayed late finishing quarterly reports. Going through vendor performance metrics. Supply chain efficiency numbers. Office was empty except cleaning crew. Headed to break room for coffee when I heard voices from Bob's office. Door was cracked open. Hallway carried sound better than people realized. The board's going to ask questions, Bob was saying. Madison's only been here 2 months. Deeper voice, older. James Mitchell from corporate. You said Jake was ready for promotion. Jake's solid, but Madison's family and she's got the degree. Board likes degrees. What about Jake's experience? Bob laughed. Not mean. Not kind either. Jake's a good worker. Reliable, but he's not executive material. He'll keep doing what he's doing. Make good money. Everything works out. I stood in that hallway 30 seconds, listening to them plan my future. Madison would get old Henderson's position, the same position I'd been training for since 2019. I'd train her, support her, pretend to be grateful. Jake won't cause problems, Bob continued. He's got a daughter, alimony payments. He needs this job. He'll fall in line. He'll fall in line. Like I was some horse being broken to saddle. Like 5 years of loyalty had earned me the right to be grateful for scraps. I walked away quiet. Didn't want them to hear my footsteps. Went back to my desk. Saved my work, left building. Drove home in complete silence. Couldn't sleep that night. Kept thinking about Bob's words. My ex-wife always said I was too passive. You let people walk over you, Jake. Stand up for yourself for once. Maybe she'd been right. Next morning I came to work different. Watched Madison closer. Noticed how Bob included her in executive meetings while keeping me focused on day-to-day operations. Saw how other managers started deferring to Madison on decisions that should have been mine. 3 weeks later, sitting in that conference room, watching Madison accept congratulations for a job she hadn't earned, something broke inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. Bob thought I needed this job. Thought I'd shut up because I had bills and a daughter and monthly alimony checks. He was wrong about everything. Opened my laptop, started typing resignation letter. Hands were steady. Head was clear. For once in my life, I knew exactly what I was going to do. But what Jake didn't know was just how much trouble Bob was about to face. I submitted my resignation letter at exactly 4:30 p.m. Friday. Bob had just returned from walking Madison around the warehouse, showing her what he called her domain. I knocked on his door, handed him the envelope. This is my 2 weeks' notice. Bob's face went through several expressions. Confusion, disbelief, then something that looked like panic. He tore open the envelope. Read quickly. Is this a joke? No, sir, you can't be serious. You're leaving because Madison got the promotion? I stayed quiet. Let him fill the silence. Bob stood up, paced behind his desk. Jake, let's be reasonable here. You're upset, I get it. But walking away from 5 years of building your career, that's not smart. I've made my decision. What about your daughter? Your responsibilities? There it was, the leverage he thought he had. The reason I'd fall in line and keep quiet. I'll manage. Bob's tone shifted. Got harder. You realize how this looks, right? Quitting because you didn't get promoted. It's unprofessional. Childish. I nodded. I can see how you'd think that. I won't give you a good reference. You understand that? Walking out like this, leaving us hanging. No company's going to want someone who throws tantrums. 5 years of perfect performance, and now I was throwing tantrums. 5 years of staying late and working weekends, and now I was unprofessional. That's your choice. Bob sat back down. Tried a different approach. Look, Jake, I like you. You're good at what you do. But Madison brings something different to the table. Youth, fresh ideas, vision. Vision, I repeated. The board wants innovation, new thinking. Madison represents the future of this company. And what do I represent? Bob paused. Experience, stability. Those are valuable too. Valuable enough to train his replacement. Not valuable enough to promote. I appreciate the clarification. Don't do this, Jake. Take the weekend. Think it over. Come back Monday and we'll pretend this conversation never happened. He genuinely believed I would back down. Believed that threatening my reference would make me fold. I'll finish out my 2 weeks. Train Madison on anything she needs to know. Bob's face darkened. You'll train her? You think Madison needs training from someone who quits when things don't go his way? She's going to need to understand the vendor contracts, the supply chain logistics, the emergency protocols. Unless you plan to figure all that out yourself. That hit home. Bob knew he didn't understand the technical side of operations. Neither did Madison. They needed me, at least for 2 more weeks. Fine, 2 weeks. But don't expect any favors. Don't expect me to help you land somewhere else. You're burning bridges here, Jake. I nodded and turned to leave. Jake, Bob called after me. You're making a mistake. A big one. I stopped at the door. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Monday morning brought revelations. I arrived early as usual and found Madison already at her desk, looking overwhelmed. She had spreadsheets open on 3 monitors and was frantically taking notes from vendor emails. Morning, Madison. How's the transition going? She looked up, relief flooding her face. Jake, thank God. I've been here since 6, trying to understand the Morrison Industries account. Their procurement manager is threatening to cancel our contract if we don't resolve some shipping issue by noon. Morrison Industries. Our biggest client. They ordered heavy machinery components worth $2.3 million annually. I'd been managing their account personally for 4 years, building the relationship through reliable service and understanding their just-in-time delivery requirements. What's the issue? Something about delayed titanium brackets from our supplier in Tucson, but I can't figure out which supplier and their emails are confusing. I looked at Madison's screen. She had Morrison's email open, but she was also looking at supplier contracts that had nothing to do with titanium brackets. She was drowning. Madison, did your dad brief you on the Morrison account? He said you'd handled the transition, but then he mentioned your situation, and I thought maybe I should figure it out myself. Show initiative. My situation. That's what they were calling it now. I spent the next 3 hours walking Madison through the Morrison relationship. Explained how their just-in-time delivery requirements worked, why they needed components delivered within 4-hour windows, how their production line would shut down if we missed deadlines. Showed her the backup supplier network I'd built over 4 years. Helped her understand why a simple shipping delay could cascade into a contract cancellation. This is incredibly complex, Madison said as we finished resolving the crisis. How do you keep track of all these moving parts? Experience and good documentation. Could you show me your documentation system? That's when I realized something. Bob hadn't just promoted Madison without preparation. He'd promoted her without understanding what the job actually required. Madison wasn't incompetent, but she was completely unprepared for the scope of regional operations. I spent my lunch break making phone calls, reached out to contacts I'd built over the years. Word travels fast in industrial logistics, and people were already hearing about changes at Blackstone. Some were concerned about continuity, others were curious about new opportunities. Jake, said Jennifer Morrison, the procurement manager who'd threatened to cancel that morning. I heard rumors about management changes. Please tell me you're still handling our account. For the next 2 weeks. After that, Madison Patterson will be your primary contact. Silence on the line. Patterson, as in Bob Patterson's daughter? That's right, Jesus, Jake. That girl called me this morning asking questions that made no sense. I thought she was new to the team, not replacing you. She's eager to learn. I don't have time to train Blackstone's management. We've got production schedules to meet. If your company can't provide competent service, we'll find someone who can. That conversation repeated itself 4 times with 4 different major clients. Copperfield Manufacturing, Border States Equipment, all saying the same thing. By the end of the day, I had a clearer picture of what would happen after I left. Madison would struggle. Clients would get frustrated. Bob would panic and try to micromanage operations he didn't understand. The whole regional division would start bleeding clients within 6 months. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Tuesday morning, Bob called me into his office. He looked tired, stressed. Jake, I've been thinking about our conversation Friday. Maybe we were hasty. Maybe there's room for both you and Madison in management. Meaning, you could be associate director. Madison's second in command. You'd handle the technical side, she'd focus on strategic planning. Associate director. A made-up title that meant doing the same job for the same pay while pretending Madison was my boss. That's generous, but I'll stick with my original decision. Bob's face hardened. You're going to regret this, Jake. I promise you that. Maybe. But I'm done living in fear of your promises. By Wednesday, I had 3 job interviews scheduled. My plan went beyond simply leaving Blackstone. I'd spent 5 years building relationships in the Southwest industrial supply chain. Those relationships were mine, not the company's. My first interview was Thursday morning with Silverlink Industries, a renewable energy equipment distributor based in Houston. Their regional manager, Tom Bradley, had been trying to poach me for 2 years. Jake, Tom said as we shook hands in his office, I heard through the grapevine that you might be available. Word travels fast. It does when good people become available, especially people with your client relationships. Tom offered me a position as Regional Operations Director, the exact title Bob had given to Madison. The salary was 30% higher than what I'd been making at Blackstone, from $65,000 to $85,000. The benefits were better, and most importantly, they wanted me to bring my client network with me. We've been trying to break into the heavy machinery component market, Tom explained. Your relationships with Morrison Industries, Copperfield Manufacturing, and Border States Equipment would be invaluable. It was ethical, standard industry practice. Clients followed account managers they trusted, especially in a relationship-based business like industrial supply. I hadn't signed a non-compete agreement, and the clients I'd served were free to choose their suppliers. I'd need to give Blackstone 2 weeks' notice, of course. Professional courtesy, though I suspect they might release you early once they understand the situation. Tom was right about that. Friday afternoon, Bob called me into his office again. Madison sat in the corner looking miserable. Apparently, word of my Thursday interview had reached them. I hear you're interviewing with competitors, Bob said. I'm exploring opportunities. While you're still employed here. While you're training Madison. That's a conflict of interest. I stayed quiet. It's also corporate espionage. Sharing proprietary information with competitors. I haven't shared any proprietary information. Your client relationships are proprietary. My client relationships are personal. I built them over 5 years of professional service. Bob's face was red now. Those clients belong to Blackstone Manufacturing. You take them with you and we'll sue you for everything you're worth. Madison spoke up from the corner. Dad, maybe we should. Shut up, Madison. Bob didn't take his eyes off me. Jake, you walk out that door and try to steal our clients, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. I stood up slowly. Bob, I've given you 5 years of my life. Perfect performance reviews, 60-hour weeks. I trained your daughter to take the job you promised me. I've been nothing but professional through this entire process. And now you're threatening me. I'm protecting my business. I'm finishing my 2 weeks' notice and moving on to a better opportunity. What happens after that depends on how you handle the transition. Bob leaned back in his chair. We'll see about that. I walked to the door, then turned back. Madison, if you need help with anything over the next week, just ask. Despite what your father thinks, I want you to succeed. Madison nodded gratefully. Bob glared. I spent my last week at Blackstone documenting everything Madison would need to know. Not because Bob deserved it, but because Madison was 23 years old and had been thrown into a situation beyond her control. The people who depended on our supply chains deserved better than chaos. On my final day, I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to coworkers, and handed Bob my security badge. This isn't over, Bob said. For me it is, I replied. I walked out of Blackstone Manufacturing feeling lighter than I had in years. The payback came 6 months later, but not in the way I'd expected. I was settling into my new role at Silverlink Industries when Tom Bradley called me into his office with a grin on his face. Jake, you need to see this, he said, sliding a business magazine across his desk. The headline read Blackstone Manufacturing Regional Division Hemorrhages Clients, Family Drama, Blamed. The article detailed how Blackstone had lost 4 major accounts in 5 months, including Morrison Industries and Copperfield Manufacturing. Revenue in the Southwest region was down 62%. The board had launched an investigation into management practices. Bob Patterson was terminated last week, Tom said. Apparently, the board discovered that Madison Patterson had been hired without proper qualifications. Nepotism investigation, they're calling it. I read further. Madison had resigned voluntarily after 3 months of struggling with accounts she couldn't manage. She'd returned to graduate school. According to the article, Bob faced a lawsuit from Morrison Industries for breach of contract after a supply chain failure caused a production delay that cost them $1.8 million. Here's the interesting part, Tom continued. 3 of their remaining clients have already reached out to us, specifically asking if you're available to handle their accounts. The article mentioned that several former Blackstone employees had been recruited by competitors, taking their institutional knowledge with them. No names were listed, but I recognized the pattern. When good people leave a company, others notice. What goes around comes around, Tom said. Bob Patterson spent 5 years taking you for granted. Now he's unemployed while you're building our Southwest division. I folded the magazine and handed it back. I feel bad for Madison. Kid got thrown into a situation she wasn't ready for. Madison will be fine. She's young, she'll learn from this. Bob, on the other hand, Tom shrugged. Hard to feel sorry for someone who threw away good people to promote family. A year later, I was driving through Austin on business when I stopped for lunch at a diner near the airport. Madison Patterson was sitting alone in a corner booth reading a textbook. She looked up when I approached. Jake, what are you doing here? Business trip, mind if I sit? She gestured to the empty seat across from her. Madison looked older, more serious. The textbook was Industrial Supply Chain Management. Back in school? Master's program at Arizona State, Supply Chain Focus. She smiled ruefully. Figured I should actually learn what I was supposed to be doing. That's smart. I wanted to thank you, Madison said, for how you handled everything. You could have hung me out to dry, but you didn't. You tried to help me succeed. You were in an impossible situation. Dad still blames you for everything. Says you sabotaged the company. I sipped my coffee. What do you think? Madison closed her textbook. I think I was 23 years old with a business degree and no real-world experience. I think Dad gave me a job I wasn't qualified for because I was family. And I think you spent 5 years earning a promotion that should have been yours. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. I'm sorry about how everything went down, Madison said. You deserved better. We both did. But sometimes things work out the way they're supposed to. Madison nodded. I heard you're doing well at Silverlink. I am, and you'll do well too once you're ready. I paid for both our lunches and shook Madison's hand before leaving. She was a good kid who'd been used as a pawn in her father's game. 6 months later, Bob Patterson filed for bankruptcy after losing his wrongful termination lawsuit against Blackstone's board of directors. Madison graduated with honors and landed an entry-level position at a logistics company in Phoenix, where she spent 2 years learning the business from the ground up before earning her first promotion. The daughter had learned what the father never understood. That respect and advancement must be earned, not inherited. Sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away and building something better. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.